So while the lymph nodes are the main lymphatic organ, there are in fact a number of different organs that make up part of the lymphatic system that you may never have thought about before. So the lymphatic organs, remember, are basically all comprised of reticular connective tissue. This stuff here with all of the cells in there. So just keep in mind that you're always going to have that reticular cell, the reticular stroma fibers that help to house all of your white blood cells that are helping you fight off infections. So that you kind of get the idea there that the lymphatic system and the immune system are closely tied together. The first of the category of organs we're going to look at are the MALT, mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue. The MALT helps to protect digestive and respiratory tracts. These are mucousy places. So basically, whenever you have a mucous membrane, you are going to probably have MALT present to help to fight off infections. So one of the places that these would be present is there are lymphoid follicles that are in the walls of the bronchi. I actually don't have a picture of that. These guys here, I gave you a glance of these before. These are called Peyer's patches. These are found in the distal small intestine and the appendix. These are isolated clusters of lymphoid follicles that help destroy pathogens that might invade in these particular special places in the body. These also are capable of generating T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes for long-term immunity if you come across something that is particularly egregious. Also part of our MALT are the tonsils that help to, it's a ring of lymphatic tissue. These appear as swellings in the mucosa that are around the pharynx. So the pharynx is basically what you usually think of as your throat. There's the oropharynx, the nasopharynx up above, the oropharynx in the middle, and then the laryngopharynx down below. And they are all, to a certain extent, surrounded by tonsils. The palatine tonsils are probably the ones that you know the best. They are in the lateral edges of the posterior end of your oral cavity, so at the back of your mouth. The idea of tonsils is that they are rings of lymphatic tissue. They appear as swellings in these mucosa. You can see in the picture there are follicles there. There are lymphoid follicles. You can actually see the germinal centers quite well here, which again tend to house B lymphocytes. They tend to be surrounded by diffuse white blood cells such as dendritic cells and macrophages. Excuse me. One of the things that you'll notice in this picture are the crypts. So the epithelium here is going to invaginate or dip inward to form these, this one's quite long, these crypts, which are, the basic idea of a crypt is to trap foodstuffs. As food passes through or different substances pass through the mouth or the nose, you have these crypts here that will trap just a small sample of that food as it passes through. And if there are any bacteria or waste products there, you will have lymphatic system there to immediately monitor that food and ensure that the body is appropriately surveilling and destroying that types of food or that type of bacteria that might be something that the body has to mount a more specific defense against. So, crypts. Very important here. We're going to be looking at an interesting case study with the crypts. Okay, so those are the main types of mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue. Again, the idea of mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue is that you have a mucous membrane. The mucous membrane is usually set up in a way that mucous membranes have a variety of purposes, but the main purpose really is kind of just to make sure that that things are trapped that are inappropriate. And then, as you can see, when you have a mucous membrane, you usually have a really good, robust lymphatic system / immune system right there to ensure that whatever you're trapping is taken care of. Let's take a look at our spleen. So the spleen is responsible for lymphocyte proliferation, which is true of all lymphatic tissue. It is also responsible for immune surveillance and response, also true of all of them. And it cleanses the blood. It helps to extract aging cells, debris, foreign matter. There are many, this is where red blood cells tend to go when they die. So that's why the spleen takes on kind of a dark reddish, kind of a brick red color. And this is called red pulp. If you look at this picture here, this is a diagram that shows all the red pulp inside of the spleen. It also shows white pulp. So white pulp are areas of lymphocytes that tend to surround your central arteries. You can see that there's quite a number of robust blood vessels that move their way through the spleen, which are very important and frankly carry just lots of blood to the spleen. And one of the things you'll see here is that there is white pulp. So the white pulp is actually areas of enormous amounts of white blood cells surrounding the blood vessels. So that enormous population of blood vessels is special. Most of your, lymph nodes, Peyer's patches, tonsils, and things like that will have some follicles. The follicles will have germinal centers, and they will have a good, population of white blood cells. But the number of white blood cells that are present in the spleen are so enormous that they actually cause a change in the color of the fascia here. They change what the tissue looks like, and that's why it's called white pulp. Okay, the structure of the spleen, it has a capsule, which in this case the capsule does not give very much protection to the spleen, unfortunately. There are trabeculae, of course there are many lymph nodes, so it's actually, there are many lymphocytes present, so the actual structure of the spleen is much like the structure of a lymph node. Okay, two more structures to note then. One of them is the appendix. The appendix, the very famous appendix, is covered in two systems. It will be covered later in the digestive system, but here it's also covered in the lymphatic system. The appendix does have many lymphoid follicles present because of its very special role, which we'll be discussing more in class. And lastly, we have the thymus. Now the thymus is, where's the thymus picture here? So here's our thymus. The thymus actually tends to rest right smack on top of the heart. And I guess this is what I have. This is a tissue slice taken out of the thymus so that you can kind of see its general makeup. The thymus is different. It is considered part of the lymphatic system, but it's different from all of the other lymphatic tissues. It's not made of your typical lymphatic, it's not made of the reticular connective tissue. It's just its own thing. So the job of the thymus is to form T lymphocytes. That's why they're called T lymphocytes, because they develop inside of the thymus. They're born in the red bone marrow, but then they move into the thymus to become what's called immunocompetent. So the thymus is not directly involved in fighting pathogens. In fact, it's actually protected from pathogens by the blood-thymus barrier. So it ensures that the thymus is not ever exposed directly to the blood. The idea of the thymus, again, is to form your T lymphocytes or allow them to develop early in life. The thymus is only active for about the first 2 years of life. And inside of here we have thymic lobules, which have a cortex and the medulla to them, but we are not going to cover that structure heavily. But the idea is that inside of the medulla, that is where you tend to have, when you have the development of the T lymphocytes, and outside of that you have the cortex, which helps you ensure that everything happening inside of the medulla is happening correctly. If we have time, we'll cover this more when we talk more specifically about the immune system.